Howdy, Dennis Bradford here. Let's think some about being, feeling, and doing better. Let's try to learn even more from Sri Nisargadatta's Maharaj's I Am That. One theme of his that other sages like Thich Nhat Hanh also emphasize is interconnectedness. Accepting it helps us detach from our counterfactual regrets. If only I had blank, where we fill in the blank with something we think we should have done and didn't do, or something we did and shouldn't have done. Realize that, quote, nothing can happen unless the entire universe makes it happen, end quote. In other words, all events are interconnected. For something to have occurred in the past that didn't occur, the universe would have had to have been different than it was. But it couldn't have been different than it was. Furthermore, all thoughts about causation are just themselves thoughts. The very idea of causation is only a way of thinking and speaking, end quote. As we shall see, other sages like David Hawkins recommend detaching from thinking that causes are real. Stop attaching to thinking about what you could do to cause yourself to gain something in the future that you crave now. Living that way involves 3 mistakes. First, quote, there is nothing to gain, end quote. If you think there is, it's because you lack knowledge of your self, with a capital S. Since your true self is being, there's nothing you lack. 2, it follows that there's nothing to crave. All craving is due to a sense of insufficiency, end quote. When you realize that you lack nothing, that you are all there is, being, all craving ceases. 3, all attaching comes from fear. Living fearfully is living foolishly. Becoming is the domain of impermanence. Quote, all attachment implies fear, for all things are transient. And fear makes one a slave, end quote. Even if you could gain what you crave, it'd quickly disappear. If it didn't disappear, you'd live in fear that it would disappear. What is the craving self anyway? To myself, I am neither perceivable nor conceivable. There is nothing I can point out and say, this I am. The feeling, I am not this or that, nor is anything mine, is so strong in me that as soon as a thing or a thought appears, there comes at once the sense, this I am not, end quote. In other words, drop all thoughts about the past, since it no longer is, and the future, since it not yet is. Then ask, which form, object, thing am I? It's impossible to single one out, isn't it? Quote, I am neither object nor subject, end quote. In other words, I am not any object of consciousness. So, who am I? I am the witnessing consciousness itself. It's an important mistake to identify with any particular form or other. The wise man counts nothing as his own, end quote. Nothing is personal. Quote, all happened as it happened because it had to happen. Everything happens as it does because the universe is as it is, end quote. There's no explanation, no causal story we need to discover or create. Reality is just as it is. Thus, being cannot be conceptualized. Pure being cannot be described, end quote. Are you still afraid to detach from the self, small s, and open to the self, capital S? Quote, the relinquishing of the lesser is the gaining of the greater. Give up all, and you gain all. The moment you know your real being, you are afraid of nothing, end quote. As we'll see when we talk about dissolving fear when we get to David Hawkins, detaching from body as well as from thoughts is critical. True growing up depends on getting the body out of the way, end quote. Do you still want to work to promote peace and harmony in the world? Work on promoting peace and harmony in yourself first. Quote, if you want to help the world, you must be beyond the need of help. Then all our doing, as well as not doing, will help the world most effectively, end quote. It is selfishness, egocentricity, attachment to self that creates all dissatisfaction. Quote, selfishness is the cause of suffering. There is no other cause, end quote. It's created when the self is separated from everything else. Quote, it is only with separateness and self-seeking that real suffering appears, end quote. When you think of yourself as separate and begin making evaluative judgments, you're creating problems where there really aren't any. Quote, it is memory and anticipation that create problems of attainment or avoidance, colored by like and dislike. The self stands in the way of true happiness, end quote. Why not stop creating problems? Quote, you are not what you believe yourself to be, end quote. You are not a separate self. Give up the idea of being a person, end quote. It's not just you. It's all non-sages who take themselves to be persons. As Eckhart Tolle also emphasizes, most people are insane. Quote, insanity is universal. Sanity is rare, end quote. Why? Almost everyone thinks they are persons. The truth is that your real self is self, with a capital S. That's the content of waking up. Quote, realization is of the fact that you are not a person, end quote. Wake up, realize your true nature, and you'll realize genuine freedom. Quote, there is only life. There is nobody who lives a life, end quote. Quote, freedom is from something, end quote. It's from the person you think you are. Quote, to see clearly, your mind must be pure and unattached, end quote, to the thought that you are a person. Quote, disregard whatever you think yourself to be. To be, you must be nobody, end quote. Quote, replace self-love by love of the self, capital S, end quote. Doing that enables detachment from experiences, and so from craving experiences. Quote, an event becomes an experience only when I am emotionally involved, end quote. If there's no person, there is no emotional involvement. Since, as we've seen, there's no for me, which is required for every emotion. The self, quote, is a bundle of desires and fears, end quote, likes and dislikes. Quote, it is not experience that you need, but the freedom from all experience. Don't be greedy for experience, end quote. Instead of a sequence of personal experiences, life is just a passing sequence of impersonal events. Actually, even the idea of a sequence is misleading. Detach too from time. Quote, the past and future are merely mental, end quote. We realize this when we still physically and mentally. Stop moving and time will cease. Past and future will merge in the eternal now, end quote. What's left after all the detaching? You are a dimensionless point of consciousness, a conscious nothing. All you can say about yourself is, I am. You are pure being awareness, bliss. To realize that is the end of all seeking, end quote. Realizing that is the end of trying to live well. It's living well. Let's end emotional distress.